Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into these videos and for paying attention and taking the time to go through this material. This material matters, it's very important, and it allows us all to get on the same page and make sure that we are communicating the same and that we all have the same rules and expectations. So I will be honest, this next video is going to be a little bit longer. It's going to take a little bit. It's going to be the rules and expectations of a 9-12 leader, and so it's not as exciting, but these details and these rules, expectations, whatever you want to call them, they matter, and they allow all of us to be operating on the same page and be able to hold each other accountable and be able to grow. So I'm going to work my way through this list and kind of talk to you about some of the things that are required of a 9-12 leader. Those are both expectations, rules, and laws. And so we'll start with laws. The first one, if you are going to be working with high school students, if you're going to be working with minors, you are now a mandated reporter. So what does a mandated reporter mean? A mandated reporter means that if a student confesses a crime to you, not a crime that they commit, more that a crime that has happened to them, if they've been abused, sexually assaulted, anything crazy like that, and they confess that to you, you are now mandated by the state of Georgia to disclose that information to me and the authorities. The reason is we want to keep students safe and to keep them out of abusive situations. And so luckily we are blessed that nothing like that has ever happened, but in the case that it does, you are mandated to disclose that information. And so if you ever have any questions or get in a situation like that, come talk to me. That's my job. It's my job to take care of those kind of things for you. But if a student ever confesses, just know that you are now a mandated reporter. So if a student ever confesses any sort of abuse or neglect or anything like that, it is your job to report that to me, and I'll make sure it gets to the proper authorities. So just let you know, you are now a mandated reporter. That's rule number one if you guys want to fill that out. Next thing, this is a rule for all 9-12 students, including myself. Never be alone with a student of the opposite sex. This is a big one. The reason this matters is just for accountability purposes and to make sure that we live above reproach. I'll keep saying that kind of over and over again, but we ask that adult male leaders never be alone with female students, and we ask that adult girl leaders never be alone with male students. And so that just protects us, protects our integrity, allows us to say, hey, you know what, we don't do that kind of thing. So it keeps accusations down and all that stuff, and you're like, why does this matter, man? Seeing an older guy with a younger girl or an older girl with a younger guy and you can tell they're not related is just weird, and people start to assume, ask questions. It's unfortunate, but people sometimes assume the worst. I mean, just for me in my life, my sister-in-law, she's 14 or 15, she's a freshman over at Carrollton. And whenever we go out, like let's say I take her to the grocery store to go get some ice cream and it's just me and her, like obviously she's my sister-in-law, so it's okay. So I take her out, but because we're family, a lot of people, or because we're not related biologically, people tell that we're different, and so people turn heads. Like I've even said, oh, I saw Trey out with a teenage girl the other day, and I'm like, it was my sister-in-law. But I'm telling you, man, you just have to be careful, and that's why we ask you to never be alone with a student of the opposite sex. And so I want to make that super clear. Next, if you are going to be alone with a student of the same sex, maybe a student reaches out to you and says, hey, I want to talk about something, maybe there's something serious, or they just want to get lunch or whatever it is, I always ask that you meet in a public place. So meet at Gallery Road, meet at Chick-fil-A, meet at City Station, go to the Mustard Seed Cafe. But if you're going to be alone with a student of the same sex, like guy and guy, girl and girl, just always meet in a public place. Just for your own safety, I do this. Never meet at a student's house. Like if nobody's home, never go out to the park because that's just weird. But either way, we just ask that if you're going to do that, kind of meet in a public place. This also applies to driving. We ask that you avoid trying to drive students alone. If you have like somebody else in the car with you, that's totally fine, or maybe another student. But if it's just a one-on-one, shoot me a text. Let me know that it happened. You won't get in trouble. We more just want to make sure that our bases are covered for liability purposes and make sure that we kind of live above reproach. Sorry, I know that's not fun, but it's just the way in the world that we live in, and so we got to make sure that we do that. Next thing is we're going to ask you, if you are willing to serve and you want to pour into high school students, if you want to be a 9-12 leader, we're going to ask you to live above reproach. So the question is, what does that mean? And so I want to be very specific. A lot of this applies to social media and just kind of the way you live your life in general. I ask that you live a life that honors Christ, and I think if you guys are farther along in your walk with Jesus, you kind of know what that looks like. But when it comes to social media, I want to be very crystal clear, just because students are on there, parents are on there, they're looking at those kind of things, they're checking you guys out and making sure who's hanging out with their kid and who they're hanging out with. So I'm going to ask a couple things. The first thing is, please do not be pictured with alcohol on social media. even if I'm not saying you can't drink, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just asking you not to be pictured of it, because people, like I said, assume the worst. And so maybe you're out at a tailgate and you're pictured with a beer, people will just assume that you got drunk at a tailgate. Like this happened to some of my leaders where they were out on the square and somebody saw them up at one of the bars, and they weren't doing anything wrong. I actually knew they were there, and I had a couple people text me and let me know that my leaders were up there drunk. And when I reached out to them, they weren't. And so just being able to live above reproach, and so that way people assume the best about you and live in such a way that they can't accuse you of things. So no alcohol in photos. I'm also going to ask that do not post kind of provocative or photos of yourself. So I'm going to ask women, please no bikini pictures, men, no Speedo pictures. I'm being serious. We just want to present ourselves, and in no way, shape, or form do we ever want to use our bodies or kind of communicate us in a physical kind of look at me kind of way. I do this personally. I actually have my trainer certification, and so I'm a certified personal trainer. But if you look at my Instagram, I rarely post pictures of workouts or me working out, just because I don't ever want to be accused of doing something like that. Like I've done it in the past, and it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. And I ask that you guys kind of live that way above reproach. If you have any questions specifically about what that looks like, please come talk to me. I joke that the rule is if you don't feel comfortable sending the picture to me or your mother, you probably shouldn't post it. So if that kind of helps give you a frame of reference. But if you have questions or you want to talk about that, my goal is not to limit you or put all these rules and regulations on you. It's just more like, hey, let's be the best example we can for our students. So next thing that does involve social media is social media, and using social media to communicate with students is 100% okay. We want you guys to use social media to communicate with students. This is where students are at, this is where they live, this is where they communicate, this is how they get their messages across. So we want you to be on platforms, TikTok, Instagram. You don't have to be. We encourage it though, just so you can kind of be where students at, see what they're doing, and just kind of gain that ground. I mean, honestly, who doesn't love it when somebody comments on their photos or likes it? Just don't be weird. But we ask that you engage them on those platforms, but also, protect yourself. Don't have some integrity. Also know that I tell students all the time when they're like, oh, I sent a Snapchat, it's gone forever. I'm like, not really. Snapchat and Instagram, they hold on to all your DMs. They pull them up in court cases. They've shown it over and over again. So if it's on the internet, it ain't gone forever. So just know that. But social media and communicating with students on that kind of platform is okay. Next thing that we want to ask you is if you want to be a 9-12 leader, if you want to be a part of this ministry, we're going to ask you to be growing. We ask you to be growing because here's the thing. I told you earlier that our goal is always to grow students, grow parents, grow them relationally, emotionally, and ultimately spiritually closer to Jesus. And so we can't do that if we ourselves are not growing. So it's my job to be growing as a pastor. It's my job to grow you guys as leaders and then grow the students and all that. And so that's my job, but we're also asking you guys to take that responsibility personally and to be growing yourselves. And so we ask that you guys kind of do that. Next thing is a little bit more simple, but if you don't have an ID badge, come find me, or if I haven't made you one yet, come just tell me and I'll make you one, because honestly we want to be identified when parents walk in, or new students or whoever it is. We want to know who the adults are in the room, and so we just ask that you always have that on you. I always have mine on me. It's just a safe way to say, hey, we're cleared, we're allowed to be with students, and it just kind of gives a level of comfort to our parents and also to our students to go, okay, that person is supposed to be here. They're not just a weird adult randomly hanging out with a bunch of high school students. And so ask if you don't have one, we'll take care of that. Lastly, I am so sorry. That's a lot of information I just dumped on you. But at the end of the day, I just ask that you all live above reproach in the way that you conduct yourselves and just kind of honor Jesus in all that you do. And everything from the mandated reporter to what we post on social media, all of that matters and is important. And so these next videos will be a little bit shorter. I hope you guys were able to take notes, be able to get all that done. If you have any questions about rules, regulations, everything that we ask you to do, come find me and we'll talk, get some lunch, and we'll go over it. But thank you guys and enjoy the next couple of videos.